using modern web development tools with Vue.js. In this video, we're going to take a look at Vue.js single file components, their template part, which represents the structure, the script part, which represents the business logic, and the style, which is responsible for the looks. So by default, these components are split into template, which means that's the structure of the data you're going to display. Then we have a script tag, which, just like the JavaScript script tag, takes care of the logic and of user interactions, or where you get your data from an API or a static file somewhere. And then we have style tag, which typically contains CSS. Now, the template isn't just simple HTML, but it actually supports some additional Vue-specific syntax tags, like the v on. So this is kind of like a JavaScript event listener, which says, hey, when this form is submitted, please run a specific function. So we have some other Vue-specific tags or attributes, like the v model. And we can also bind certain properties to vanilla HTML attributes. So for example, if this property is true, we add the specific class. We also have placeholders. So double curly brackets will display a value that we have in our JavaScript memory, so in the script part of the page, into our template. For some properties, like the image source, we can bind them also straight to variable from our state, and we can loop over specific items with the v4 tag. Now, in the script tag, we define the name of our component, and we have our data object. So this is kind of interactive part in what can change in your component and what usually changes the display for the user as well. And for the methods, we have actual functions we run that do something, that either change the behavior or change some of the data on the page or send them to a server. And the style, this is pretty typical CSS. So it might feel a little weird at first to write that on the same page as where your template is, because usually we write the CSS in the CSS file and the HTML file is on its own. But this way it actually can be extracted and only required when the user loads a page that the style requires or that has a component that this style is for. One more interesting thing about these three tags is you can decide which language you want to write them in or which dialect of a language you want to write them in. So for example, if you're a fan of Puck, formerly known as J templates, you can just say lang equals Puck, and you'll be able to use the Puck language. This might require additional plugins and additional settings in the webpack config, but usually the Vue CLI will ask you in the creation process. So you're also free to use TypeScript in the script tag by defining lang ts. So this means that you can have one of your components written in TypeScript, whereas the rest of your application is written in plain JavaScript, which can be very useful for experimenting with different language dialects or saying, I would like to migrate my application over to TypeScript, but I would like to do that one component at a time because I don't have time or my application is too much in flux to be rewritten all at once. For the style, you can choose between different preprocessors like stylus or less or sass as well. Now, if your editor does not highlight the template tag as HTML or it doesn't highlight the script tag as JavaScript, you might want to look into getting an extension for your editor. For VS Code, there is a great extension called Vitur, which I'm also using for this tutorial, which basically makes sure your editor highlights these single file components correctly. There are also other extensions for different editors, for Sublime or for Atom. So don't be afraid to have a look around their plugin or extension space to make sure that you get the best possible development experience out of Vue.